Welcome back to Creative Capital. So often we focus on the act of fundraising, but as most know, fundraising doesn't end when a donor makes a gift. In fact, that's just the beginning. Effective stewardship ensures donors feel valued and keeps them coming back year after year. Let's look at some of the points of this just to reinforce it. The first is the importance of stewardship itself. Stewardship is about showing appreciation and keeping donors engaged. It's not about asking for money again. It's about nurturing the relationship, keeping people close, making them feel valued and satisfied. Next, your goal is to make donors feel like partners in your mission. When donors feel valued, they are more likely to give again. And finally, on this, your personalized acknowledgement. If you start by thanking donors immediately after they make their gift, something like a phone call or a handwritten note or a personal email, that can really go a long way just in showing your appreciation and again, drawing them closer to the institution after they've done something so important. Next, regular communication. This is how we start to steward people. We keep donors updated on the impact of their gifts. We share stories and information and data and the outcomes that demonstrate the value of their support. Remember, we like to go into asks with that same sort of information. Why wouldn't we want to continue to give them that kind of information after they've made their gift of support? We invite donors to special events and sometimes behind-the-scenes tours or maybe a meet and greet with some of the people that their gifts are helping. And number 3, involving donors in organizational growth. We like to invite donors to participate in your organization's growth. That can mean asking for feedback, involving them in volunteer opportunities, or giving them insight into future initiatives. By involving them, they feel like an integral part of the mission because they are. But more at the root, what is stewardship? Is it be nice? Is it you give me money, I give you stuff? Does it involve e-blasts and newsletters and annual reports? Well, kind of, yeah, sure. Yes to almost all, but no to almost all, and I'll explain what I mean by that. In clinical terms, it's the careful and responsible management of something entrusted to one's care. But in our case, it's someone. Donors at all levels are the lifeblood of an arts organization. The act of giving is an act of trust and a desire to be part of something highly valued. Simply put, showing appreciation to build a deeper connection. We like to say thank the donor, then thank the donor, and oh yeah, don't forget to thank the donor. But it really is even much deeper than that. We want to show appreciation as the doorway, as the gateway to having us build deeper, more valued relationships. You may have heard tales, specific metrics or touches, and while measuring is important because we're a big believer in measuring too, the quality of the contact is more important than playing the numbers. In my world, there's no magic number for how many touches should somebody get before we move them to the next step. It's more of a consistency. How can we be thoughtful and personal with communications? How do we get to know donors? How do we hear their feedback? How do we adapt to what brings them satisfaction and joy? For some, it's just information, but for others, it's feelings. And yet for others, they want to make a gift and be left alone. And that's okay too. That's why we say careful, responsible management. But moving on, this idea of learning why people give. We've discussed in earlier videos the 3 core donor motivations for giving, what it does for the arts organization, what it does for the community, and what it does for the donor specifically. When it comes to stewardship, though, we mostly look through the lens of what it does for the donor personally. Not always, but often. So we're going to stick with that, leaning into why those people give. And again, it's me, the organization, or the community. Who does it benefit the most? Second, there are 2 ways to lean into communication. And we're big believers that you should communicate frequently, but meaningfully. So the 2 ways are personally with major donors, and that could be as simple as forwarding them your latest newsletter or press release with personal notes and highlights that you say, hey, make sure you look at the 3rd story, 2nd paragraph, something like that, so they know why you're sending that to them. It could be as deep as inviting them to a behind-the-scenes event or walking them through an education program, inviting them to a school, and to see how the education work is done. And really broad updates and newsletters. So it can be as general or specific. It can be as broad or as intimate as you would like, and coming up with that list of variety will really help you. And of course, providing engaging benefits. I'm not a trinket fan. I'm not a fan of the giving away trinkets and keychains and bags and those. I understand why organizations do that, but I think when we're in arts and culture, we're doing enough front-facing activity. That's what we offer. That's what we offer. It's one is too transactional when we're just giving things away. I give you money, you give me stuff. It feels really transactional. So I want to be sure that we are doing engaging benefits, things that draw them in, things that make them part of the story as much as possible. And then having a few of the others, a few of the other things where they get recognition, of course. But for those donors who don't want to be involved or can't be involved, we'll have a few things for them as well. All right, so remember our donor flywheel. We talked about this in a couple of other videos. All those steps are important, but stewardship is what adds value and satisfaction to the donor's relationship with your institution. At RSC, we often label it as appreciation because that's a succinct way to define stewardship. Defining stewardship is to define appreciation. Without any cheers and without any shame, I want you to think about how well your organization appreciates your donors. Not just with benefits and recognition, but in relationship. If you asked a donor what they value most, let's say you ask someone at $10,000, you ask someone at $1,000, and you ask somebody at $100 what they value most about their relationship, think about what those answers might really be, because it'll be really telling then when you line up your donor benefits. Does it make sense? Are we doing the right things? Are we doing enough of the right things? All right, donor stewardship is often a place where deficiencies occur. We obsess about getting the gift. We really want to get the gift. Looking at how do we keep donors. Stewardship is about keeping donors. That's why it matters, because you rely on donors for gifts year after year. Growth requires retention, and here's a way to look at it. First of all, that keeping of donors. A healthy annual fund program raises 80 to 90% of their funds from renewing donors. And at the rate that we have to grow annual funds year over year, retention is absolutely essential. We can't take it for granted. We can't have a hiccup year. We have to work really hard on keeping donors. So the greater the donor loss, even at lower levels, it becomes a huge risk because we don't have a healthy pipeline of donors to move up into giving. We're not a university where we graduate 10,000 new potential donors a year with their degree programs. Arts organizations appeal to about 1, maybe 2% of their metro area. That's what we're working with. And so this idea of getting donors and retaining donors is paramount. That is why stewardship matters. So number 2 is upgrading donors, this idea of increasing their gift. We don't want a $50 donor to stay at $50 forever. We want to increase the value and their appreciation of the institution so that they'll continue to give at higher levels year over year. We know that we've got donors who are at the broad base and then in the middle and then fewer at the top. That's why they call it a donor pyramid. So we have fewer donors, usually higher value at the top. We have many more in the middle at a good, strong value, probably not the same value at the top. And then we have the broad base of donors, who there are many of them. Their per capita value is lower, but there are just more of them, and that's what creates that pyramid. So this idea of not just keeping donors, but also upgrading donors and moving them through the pipeline is important. Why? Because we know at all levels, broad base, middle, and top, we're going to have some attrition. We know donors will stop giving, they'll reduce their giving, or they may pass away and stop giving because of that. So this idea of always moving people through the pipeline as much as we can, being very thoughtful, very considerate about it, that's again where stewardship comes into play. That's why stewardship matters. And number 3, we always want to value our donors. This is purely about relationship. There might be a big difference between how you feel the donor is valued and that the donor feels the donor is valued. You'll need to look through the eyes of the donors. You'll need to have another reason that's true relationship building to them. Always be creating opportunities to engage with those donors. And last on the list is developing a culture of philanthropy. To me, that means we have these relationships, we find out what's valuable, and then we turn that inward. We turn that relationship inward to us so that we can create a culture of philanthropy throughout our institution. It's not just enough for the development officer or officers to have it, or the executive director to have it, or even the board to have it. Institutionally, we have to think about what's important to our patron base, what's important to our donors, and really make that part of who we are as a culture of a nonprofit. Okay, but let's refocus on our donors. And let's be specific in a single area. We often get the question of how to activate the board in stewardship activities. We don't want the entire board asking for money, but we really do want the entire board stewarding donor relationships and helping us keep donors. One way to do it is to formalize it. You can have a donor appreciation team that receives lists of new donors, and they have thank you nights, or they handwrite letters and note cards, or they greet people at events. And I really think that is a great way to do it. That's a great way to start, particularly at the broad base where you may not be able to see everybody all the time. You can deploy your board to help with that. Number two, and I mentioned this earlier too, the stewardship calling campaign. It's very simple. Don't make it complicated. It's very simple. You can do it at the office and have everyone show up 2 nights a month, or you can give lists to people, sans any private information on their donation. You can give that to the board and have board members call at their leisure over the course of 2 or 3 days. Most opportunities, they'll leave voicemail messages, and that's okay. In fact, I know people who keep their voicemail messages from board members for a really long time because it was just so nice that the board called and thanked me for my gift. It really is genuinely that nice. If you don't do anything else, here's a couple of ideas, but systematize it, have your list together, have your people together, know what you want them to say, script it out, or write it out if they're going to do handwritten notes. Give them the tools to do it. Make it simple, make it easy, make it repetitive. And here's one final idea, sort of this long-term donor relationship maintenance, that we select individual donors to regularly update on plans and progress throughout the year. It's intentionality to speak with donors who are non-board members, but who are at the upper levels of giving, that you want to have personal meetings with them that do not involve asking them for money. Don't do 5 or 10 of them for each donor. Do 1 or 2 of them. Donors like to see their time valued, and they really like to hear information, insider information, before it goes to the general public. So those are a couple of my rules when I say, when should I meet with each donor and what should I say? Here's what I'll tell you, particularly if you're a board member and you're involved in stewardship, you don't need to know all the facts. You don't need to know every single thing going on in the institution at any given moment. The likelihood is no donor will ever ask you about it unless they're involved in something specific with your institution. And if you do get a question that you can't answer, it's okay to say, you know what, I don't know. Let me find out for you, and either I'll call you back or I'll have a staff member call you back. Would that be okay? It's all you need to do. And 10 times out of 10, they're going to go, yeah, of course. They're making conversation and they're curious about something, and we don't want to stop that curiosity, but we may not have a ready-made answer. And you as a volunteer shouldn't try to know every single thing going on all the time. It's just impossible. Next, your message should be developed from your own story and background. I'd like to see board members talk about how what they're about to say impacts them, or how they're involved, or if one of their children or grandchildren or somebody they know is involved. Personalize that story. Make sure that it's really powerful. That's what gives it the power, is by personalizing it. In short, develop your story, not just for stewardship, but also for asking. I'll focus on this stewardship and tell you a little bit more about what we mean. How do you develop your story? I can tell you, whether you're an artist or a board member or staff member or a volunteer of some other sort, your story with the organization is in fact unique. It's yours, and it's the one you should try to tell. How do you tell it? And what questions do you start with? And they're statements for the most part, and they're things that you should answer in your own time to prepare yourself to be part of a stewardship team. How do you say it? First of all, why and how did you get involved with the organization? I became involved in the orchestra because, or I'm a board member because. Number 2, why is it important to you? What attracted me to being a board member, and I'll use board member instead of artist on this, but what attracted me to become a board member is because. And then you finish that sentence. What 1 reason, 2 reasons, 3 reasons? What attracted you to doing that? What delights you about the organization? What's your favorite 2 things or 3 things? When you think about the orchestra and you smile, for some of you it's going to be, we balanced the budget 3 years in a row. Fantastic. For others, it's going to be, I saw this event and it was something that 5 years ago we couldn't do, but now we can do it, and that shows organizational progress. So think about what that means to you. What delights you about the organization? Why do you make a personal contribution? Now, beyond just I'm on the board, which if you're on the board, That's part of your answer, but that can't be the whole answer. If you can define why you make personal contributions, it'll help other people decide not just to do it, but how to do it and how much to do. Next is, what has impressed you the most about the organization over the past 3 years or 5 years, whatever definition you want to give there. But again, the idea would be, particularly if an organization has overcome a specific hurdle, that's one way. If it's accomplished or made a certain achievement, or if it went on a tour, or if it provided a program that's brand new and had a huge impact. It's not just what the organization does. It might be that we've changed the infrastructure and we have a stronger organization because of it. That's okay too. Depending on who you are is how you'll answer this statement. And last, what excites you about the organization's future? If you are on the board, and even if you're an artist, what really excites you about the future? How would you define that? The chances are, once you define that and you start talking about it, that will also excite somebody else about the future. This donor or prospect, whoever you're stewarding, that message will also help inspire them. Okay, what are we going to ask donors? We've asked ourselves lots of questions to prepare for this, but how do we engage donors? Here are some of the things that you can ask. How did you first get involved with this organization? We want the question to be engaging. This is one of the core ways to do it. We want it to be the root product of our conversation. And so if you don't know the answer to this question, go ahead and ask them. It's a good way to build dialogue. And so just how did they first get involved? In many cases, you'll find that they were a consumer. You were probably a consumer when you started. And maybe the next question is, did you study or grow up with music or dance or art, depending on your arts discipline? What we find is that many people, even in today's world, took private lessons or they took classroom instruction, but they have some sort of artistic background that led them to consume your art and now consider a gift. Next is, what is your favorite performance or exhibition or experience that you've had with our organization? Almost everybody can answer that. It'll be something memorable. It's likely to be something big or unique or one of a kind. Be ready for that, but be surprised. Sometimes they might just say, I love it every time you do a choral work. Or I really am glad that we have repurposed this part of the real estate, so now we have an education wing. It could be dozens of things. What does your involvement with this organization mean to you? Ask them, and ask them in a non-superficial way. Like, what does it mean to you? When you make a gift and you get a thank you, what's the first thing you think of? I like to ask that question because the top of mind response that you get is usually the core motivator for why they give. And last on this one, what do you anticipate most about the organization's future? Might be a good thing, might not be a good thing. It's okay. Any answer is okay. Somebody might say, with the way the economy is, it's going to be a lot harder to manage this orchestra. Or we're about to lose our artistic director of 27 years. So it could be something like that where they're really concerned, or it could just be the promise of a new performing arts center being built means great things for us. Asking them what do they anticipate most about the organization's future can be a real point of conversation, particularly in stewardship. All right, so let's look at your next steps. There's certainly more unpacking to do in this to prepare your board and prepare your staff and artists, how they can develop their personal story, how they can engage donors through asking good questions, and knowing the when, where, and how to share. That specialty coaching has more detail than I can outline here. But let's talk about what your next steps are. First, I would say regular communication. Establish a schedule for consistent updates and check-ins with donors to keep them informed and engaged. Make sure that you know what you're going to say, how you're going to say it, who's going to say it, and the reason that you're going to put that kind of information to them. Number 2, express gratitude. We talked about thank the donor. This is thanking the donor. So it's not just saying thank you, though. It's also expressing gratitude in other ways. That personalized way of reaching out and with a thank you note, or inviting them to an event, or having them tag along to an education opportunity. Those are the things that really, truly express gratitude. Number 3, seek feedback. You might not always like what you hear. That's okay. Encourage donors to share their experiences and make suggestions to enhance engagement and satisfaction. There's that old fundraising saying that if you want money, ask for advice, and if you want advice, ask for money. This is one of those stewardship moments where you're asking for advice, because if you listen, Even if you can't do everything that they suggest, they know they've been heard, and you can bring that back around the next time that you talk with them, even if that next time is a gift ask. Number 4 is to activate your board. We talk a lot about that because the board has such big responsibilities for the organization, and they provide such distinct leverage over really anybody else associated with the organization. Activate that board. Not every board member should be asking, never forget, but every board member can help keep donors. Next on the list is involve your communities to support fundraising initiatives. If you're really community focused, you have built-in relationships. It's a lot of fun to do this. But you can host community events. You can organize local events with some of your partners that create awareness not only of you and of them, but also of the partnership that you have together. So that really increases the value. You can collaborate with local businesses. I like it when we have sponsors and we can take musicians or artists or dancers or whatever to their business and let them bring some of their constituents in. It shows the strength of the partnership that they have. And even on the individual side, you can do this one-on-one where people host things in their home and you bring an artist in, but it really helps that collaboration and it shows that you're part of the community and that you don't demand that people come to you all the time to consume your art. It's a really unique moment. And so those are a few of the ideas. And I would just say in conclusion that stewardship is a long-term strategy. It's not a single act. It's a long-term strategy. It's a team strategy. It's designed to keep donors, but be consistent. Again, don't come up with 1,000 things. Come up with 3, 4, 5 things and get really good at delivering them. Keep those donors informed and keep them involved in your organization so that you can create loyal supporters for the future.